planet Earth a big accident? Did it just manage to come into existence in this universe with no real meaning or reason for that to be true? We have to decide, each of us on our own, whether or not that's the case. For my part, I believe there's a God, and I believe He created this planet and the life that was on it on purpose, that it was by intent, and that makes it easier for me to understand my world. Besides that, I just believe it's true, regardless whether or not it helps me to understand my world. I want to talk today on a subject of Soul Survivor on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Friday the 4th of February of 2022. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on Parler, on Minds, minds.com, on Locals, and on my Facebook page or wherever else you happen to be finding me today. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform, but that doesn't mean you have to watch me there. You can, of course, watch me on any of the platforms where I put my content at this moment in time. Again, the subject for today is Soul Survivor, and I want to go ahead and go through my notes real quick to give you some idea what I'm thinking and why, kind of what you can gather from what it is that I'm saying. One of the most devastating things to a lot of people who manage to live through some horrible event or series of them is to have survived watching or knowing that others perished they counted more worthy of living than themselves. This has been termed survivor's guilt, and it's not terribly unexpected and not at all unreasonable if misplaced. Those among us who are Christians ought largely to count this an idea that is broken. If I assume there's a higher power and that He's intimately aware of and involved in His creation, one might assume there was some reason a given individual survived when others who seem more qualified for future endeavors passed on. I think this to be an entirely proper conclusion to which one might come. You see, it isn't really about me. If I happen to be the one who continues to be, it's not really about me. Rather, it's about the desires of the Creator. And that's assuming you believe that, and I do. I believe in the Creator, and that's why I say what I do. Going a step further, the assumption that those who are no longer here have suffered some horrible fate in leaving may be reasonable for unbelievers, but for the person who assumes the existence of a higher power, it's not really logical to make such an assumption. Put another way, even if those no longer among us are not destined for heaven, that doesn't mean what they would have faced had they continued to live would have been somehow better than perishing. Does this sound like a strange idea? Perhaps. If you believe in God, it's one you might want to give a good once-over. For those destined for a heavenly reward, there's no question from my perspective they're in a better place if they pass on. All of this considered, let's take a look at the folks who survived. It's fair to make an argument there was some reason for that to have happened. Though maybe no more so, than people who were not subject to the hardship that caused others to cease to be. Right? Some might make the case that such people were in some wise destined for greatness. Where that's certainly possible, I think it a bit presumptuous to say as much. Considering that I might be on this planet for the help of others is not necessarily a horrible suggestion. Let's not forget, though, I'm as much here for my benefit and perfection as anything else. The simple reality is I may survive something which many others do not for the simple fact that I'm not yet what I ought to be. Put another way, the assumption that I'm somehow destined for fame, fortune, or even general betterment of the remainder of mankind is not one that must be made if I happen to live on when others fail to do so, regardless how. Think a survivor has no reason to claim he or she lives on for cause? You'll forgive me if I disagree. Done with my notes. On with our free piece. Look, The fact that I acknowledge the existence of a creator means that I have to assume his decisions, I say his because that's biblically the pronoun that's used, his decisions are better than my own. Part of what that means is, if I live on when others pass on, it means that I need to be here and they don't. That wasn't my decision, and it isn't somehow touting me as some sort of tremendous or fantastic or worthy person. That's not what that's about. What we're saying here is this. God looked at me and said, either there are others who need you to be around, or I need you to be around for your betterment or your perfection. And these others, they can move on. Either they're not going to be perfected, or they have been already. Okay? It isn't somehow making me into some grandiose, larger-than-life figure. Now, that doesn't mean I won't be such a thing as a result. Okay? I think it was maybe Corrie ten Boom who said at some point something to that effect, that God keeps you around because he has a purpose for you. But I don't think Corrie intended to say that purpose for you was for you to be somehow for the betterment of mankind. That's not to say that's not possible. That's not to say that's not something that can and maybe will happen. But what I want for you to understand is, I may be the biggest bungler on the planet. I may be messing it up, and God may be keeping me around to help me to become a better person for my sake. And again, am I saying those other people passed on because, how to put this, because they weren't worthy of living on? No, in fact, what I'm saying to you potentially is they were far worthier than me. That's why they passed on. They were already worthy. They were ready for a better reward, a greater place. There's no way to know. And I'm going to say this again. Imagine there's a God, and that God decides that there's a person who just is never going to get any better than he is now. And assume that he's outside of time, and he can see everything that would be going on in that individual's life. And he can track any alternate realities, whatever you want to say. And he looks at that individual and he says, that person is just not going to get any better, not going to be any better. Time for them to go. So there's that. Then they're already way better than me. Then they're exactly where they need to be, regardless whether it's way better than me or just a little bit so. Whatever it happens to be. Then there's maybe I'll be the savior of humanity, or maybe I'll just be there to improve myself. This idea that I have to be some fantastic individual to live on, that's not really a reasonable idea. It's not really a reasonable thing to conclude or assume. And this is what people need to understand. This idea of sole survivor or survivor when other people pass on. You may feel survivor's guilt as a result of that, but what you need to know is, if there is indeed, as I assume, a creator, he has the authority, the right, and the rhyme and the reason to keep me here if he feels there's a need for that. That doesn't mean that I'm going to save the rest of the world, though it might. That doesn't mean that I'm going to reach perfection. It just means that it's not time for me to not improve, I guess you could say. We're all going to pass on at some time in some way, and that's regardless whether there's a God or there isn't. But my point is to say this: whether I pass on sooner or later, that's not a thing that says that what happens after this is better or better or worse. But it's not a thing to say that what happens is, I'm losing my train of thought here, but you get the idea. The point is, saying that a person who survives shouldn't realize that if they believe in a higher power, they're here for a purpose, regardless whether it's just their perfection or the salvation of humanity, whichever it happens to be. That's really, you can't say that. You can't make that argument. Okay, I need to go ahead and wrap this up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Friday, the 4th of February, 2022. The Sabbath begins at sundown on today, and for those who observe it, and it will end on sundown tomorrow, Saturday, the 5th of February, 2022. If you happen to be a person who celebrates the Sabbath, who observes that Sabbath, We are coming up on that weekend for pretty much everybody. Some people have to work on it. I know that that's true around here. A lot of people are probably stuck at home just because of the weather. In any case, thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on Minds.com, on MINDS, on Locals.com, on my Facebook page, on Parler, wherever else you happen to see me. Remember, Rumble is sort of my preferred platform. You can give me a boxing glove or a Rumble on Rumble. You can give me a plus or a minus on Rumble for a positive or negative feedback. Obviously, anywhere else you happen to have the ability to do feedback of one kind or another, negative, positive, whatever it happens to be, you can do that. You can comment on my content if there's a place to do that, and I'll look at it and I'll reply if I think that that's a reasonable thing to do. Subject for today has been Soul Survivor, and tomorrow we're going to talk about incidental and accidental, and this is with regard to various things that have happened out of horrendous events in the past in many instances, whether it's people carrying on experimentation and various things from those things or whatever it happens to be. Hope you're having a good day today. Hope everything is going well for you. Sorry if I seem to be a little bit nebulous today. I'm cold, among other things, but also I'm trying to get some other things going on in my head and for other work that I'm doing at the moment. But anyway, glad to have had you along one way or the other, and hopefully we will see you again on Saturday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was recorded on Friday, the 4th of February of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.